This is Steve DeLong with the Dad AF podcast. I'm sitting here today with Chris Barnes. We'll get into his story momentarily. I just wanted to thank him for taking the time today to come see me. He is a restaurateur, has a crazy life, 2 twin boys, multiple restaurants, and a very busy man as well. So it's much appreciated that you're here. Thanks for coming.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we'll get right into it. So we were discussing a little bit before we were on camera about, it's just you meet somebody, you love them. I'm not sure Ariel and yours timeline, but you meet somebody, you get married, you're like, cool, we're going to have kids, and you find out you've got twin boys coming, right? So
yeah.
You're just like, cool, let's go play baseball, let's go play football, basketball, whatever.
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah, right? And then you kind of get into some of the prenatal stuff, and you're figuring out what's going on with the kids, checking to make sure they're healthy. And you had already said that, one of your boys was developing pretty normally. And then Owen discovered a couple of things happening around the 26-week mark.
Yep. And so we had the benefit of being in the middle of COVID too. The boys just turned 5. So all of this is happening during the middle of COVID protocols where I wasn't even able to be in some of the ultrasounds for this stuff.
Oh yeah. Made life so much less stressful and easy, right?
And neither of us had a job at that point because everything was closed.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, we were in a little apartment in East Falls. Found out she was pregnant. Thought, okay, we can survive here during COVID for a little bit with one.
Yeah.
Found out that it was twins, realized very quickly that we were not going to have enough space. And then as soon as we started to try to figure out what our next steps were, found out that Owen had some challenges.
Yeah.
They saw enlarged brain ventricles in I think our 26-week ultrasound, which started to guide us down a path of finding out what things were and then finding out that it wasn't exactly what we thought it was. Because, in utero, they do a great job of trying to diagnose as much as they can.
Yeah.
And we had a great team at CHOP. We had an amazing maternal fetal medicine doc at CHOP who kind of started the diagnosis, got us with a neurologist. So we were prepared for whatever happened after they were born to try to kind of traverse that path.
Yeah.
And at the time we thought, this is enlarged brain ventricles. We're going to keep an eye on him. Then we found out he had an absent corpus callosum, which is essentially, and I'm not a doctor, but is essentially this little golf ball sized piece that connects the left and right hemispheres of your brain.
Okay.
On motor skills and speech and development and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And that's why the brain ventricles looked enlarged. They were kind of taking up some of that space.
Okay.
And so we thought we had a pretty good handle on this until he was born. And with twins, a lot of the time, there's a problem with blood flow as they're developing. And essentially what happens is sometimes one of them doesn't get enough blood flow while they're developing.
Yeah.
So it creates some challenges.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't develop like a typical kid in the womb, which leads to things outside of the womb. So about a week and a half before, our tentative due date timeline, the doctors at CHOP decided that they should be delivered there instead of our regular hospital. So that way, if they needed additional support because it was COVID, we could all be together in one place and have all the support and have everything we need. And thank God, because things got interesting after that.
Yeah.
Once they were born, my one needed oxygen right away. And so he was in the NICU for about 4 days, with just, I think, typical twin stuff, being born at 37 weeks. And then Owen's stuff didn't even appear right away. He had a small cleft lip. We knew about the corpus callosum piece. And then we thought we were in a pretty good spot with him. He ended up coming home. They were born December 18th. He came home on December 24th.
Okay.
Emmett had come home about 2 days earlier. We thought we were in pretty good shape. We were just testing his blood sugar levels. Ended up going back to the hospital about 5 days later with a diagnosis of hyperinsulinism, which they give kids this medication called diazoxide for. And so he was in there, and this was relatively routine. We figured this was stress. He may grow out of this. As we're in there, he had some troubles with breathing and feeding at the same time. And this is kind of where we found out that the big part of his diagnosis was what they call a nasal encephalocele.
Okay.
And I don't know how much detail you want me to go in on this.
This is, but it's all, listen, it's all relative, right? Because I think to truly understand the experience of what you went through, knowing kind of what, because I'm listening to you, and I'm being taken back to like that moment when my son was born. He was 35 weeks. So when he was born, he was having breathing issues. He was underdeveloped. His lungs weren't there. I mean, we joke now that he kind of looked like a broiler fryer chicken.
Oh,
Like when they
geez.
pulled him out, they held him
Yeah.
up, and it was just like nothing,
Oh, right.
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was no noise, no crying, no nothing. So when he was born, his lungs weren't quite right. So they ended up having to do a surfactant treatment to kind of seal him up so the CO2 wouldn't enter his oxygen or his blood again. And then basically just kind of like starve him of oxygen as he was newly born. But I was listening to the doctor, and he's explaining all this stuff to me. And I'm like, I've been up for 25 hours. My wife is
Oh,
whacked
yeah.
out on magnesium. I'm listening to a guy with a thick Ukrainian accent try to tell me what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're the doctor. I trust you. So like, I'm being brought back to that right
Yeah.
now with that. You're talking about a bunch of stuff without the accent. But, I think it's important to understand, what you dealt with. So
Yeah. I
people
mean,
out there that are listening can understand.
so it's not a straight line, right? Like a lot of this stuff, especially when you're not sure exactly what's happening, is the diagnosis, right? And during that's kind of a roller coaster, and you think it's this, and then you think it's this, and then you move this way, and then you find out there's something else going on that's causing these things, and you're almost on a pivot the entire time.
Yeah.
So for us, when we went back in, and he had problems with that, is really where we found out he had a thing called a nasal encephalocele, which the doctors were very quick with us. Like, don't Google this, because whatever you see is not exactly what he has.
Yes.
Most of the time, those are like external pieces for him. There's a little piece of bone in between the nasal cavity and where the brain is. And that hadn't grown together completely. So there was a small little piece of his brain sac that essentially like drooped into the nasal cavity.
Okay.
And it was obstructing his breathing.
Yeah.
And the theory at the time was that, it's small, it's not something we need to be super concerned with, but when he's eating is when we're having problems with this. So let's give him a G-tube and feed him through his belly so we can kind of just avoid that piece so he can get bigger and stronger and develop out.
Develop out of it, right? Yeah.
And so we did the G-tube surgery thinking this was going to be a solution. We'd be able to go home, and this is, less than 2 months in.
Yeah. Mind you, again, during COVID.
Yes. So. Yeah. Yes. That night, his surgery was done. He was coming off, and he had like some blow by oxygen. His oxygen levels were a little bit low. Nobody seemed very concerned with it at the time. And he ended up coding that evening.
Okay.
Million people in the room, terrified, really scary situation. And what they had to do was intubate him at that time, just to try to give him a safe airway.
Yeah.
So for the next 5 days, he was intubated. So, you have a brand new baby. You're trying to do all these things.
Yeah.
To hold him at that time, and I remember feeling for my wife more than anyone, because, she had a C-section surgery, so she was already uncomfortable. And to hold him, they would have to put her in this chair, and it would take a respiratory therapist and 2 other people to kind of take him and all of that equipment to put him onto her lap or my lap.
Again, not to the same degree, but, I remember my son had feeding tube, and he had a bunch of stuff hooked up to him. So yeah, when we wanted to just do skin to skin, it was like, every wire known to man. Yeah. So anyway, continue.
So, I mean, it's just crushing feeling, right?
Yeah.
When you have a kid who is going through a bunch of stuff, and you can't even just hold them at that point.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking.
And here we have another one. So and this is where, I'm so grateful that we ended up at CHOP. The nurses, the doctors, the providers there created a space for us where we had another child with us. And we had like a little bassinet for him in the room. Every day they would come in and spend time with him as well. And so we're here trying to like support our one, but also like we're brand new parents. We'd never done this before.
Yeah.
This is our indoctrination in the whole
there's
thing.
no book, and then there's no book for the book that you guys needed. I mean, you needed like a physics level.
I think we still do. I joke that I should just get into school for medicine now, because of what we've done at this point, right? Because of my baseline.
Yeah.
What essentially came out of him being intubated, About 5 days later, we had a meeting with, forget the term they use for it. I think it's just called like family meeting, but with doctors from like 5 different specialties. It was a room of about 20 people.
Yeah.
All trying to figure out what were the potential options for him.
Yeah.
Is there a way to send him home like this? Should we keep him in the hospital? What can we do? And they were all kind of working together, but at odds with what their objectives were.
Sure.
ENT couldn't allow us to do a CPAP, which would have tried to open that airway, because they were concerned about it tearing the brain sac and him having a CSF leak, which creates all kinds of additional problems.
Yeah.
We certainly couldn't keep him intubated, right, for any period of time. So the end decision was to give him a trach. And the thought was at that time, this was going to be a year and a half.
Yeah.
We'll get this thing out. We'll move on, carry on as like a typical kid at that point.
Family. Yeah.
So in about a year and a half, we did a surgery for him that should have been a couple of days. They essentially tried to cauterize that little sac to get that to move up, to open up his airway. We had some amazing people involved in that, but it started to leak. And so they had to go back in and try to fix the leak. And it created this 5-week disaster.
Yeah.
That include a chemical meningitis and a shunt in the back of his head, essentially an EVD to drain the fluid or level out the stuff. So they had to drill a hole in his head to and essentially sedate him for a big chunk of time. Yeah. And it was interesting, but we found out once we got through all of that, we thought, okay, this is the end of it, right? Like 3 months from now, we'll get another MRI. We'll be good. We can get straight out. We can move on.
Yeah.
And what we found out is that it came back exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So
nothing changed.
We were moved from that to essentially every 6 months to a year, we were going to get another test to see if this was an option. And so now we ended up really, truly having to navigate trach life. Like as a baby, it was one thing. As a emerging toddler, and then go into preschool and things along those lines. It includes nursing 16 hours a day, somebody monitoring him every hour, especially at night. Man, it created a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I can't even. We are 15 minutes into this, and that is enough for like 7 lifetimes, I think.
That was a short version, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I mean, not spoiler alert, but we're sitting here now and he had the trach tube taken out a week ago, right?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. I mean, which is a milestone that maybe you thought might never happen, right? Or were you on
until the Tuesday prior? I mean, we had been optimistic, but we'd had this date set for a while. We finally got clearance to do our neurologist and our neurosurgeon and our ENT about 9 months ago finally said, listen, we can do the surgery again. We don't know if it's going to work. It's not big enough for us to do a bone graft or anything that completely do this without doing like a full craniotomy. Yeah. Right. And a craniotomy is essentially where they take off the whole top of your skull, which was just not an option for us. No. Like, unless that's the only option, it wasn't an option.
Yeah, sure. I get it. Well, because you're weighing the risks and the reward, and what do you really want to put him through at this point still, right?
So it's funny that one of our nurses, when she came in for her first shift, she said, well, he is a mess on paper. And then you see him and you go, well, where is all this stuff?
Yeah, right.
And the doctors actually mimicked that as well, because essentially what they were saying is, we don't want to do this surgery because he's developing well. He's walking and talking and playing sports and going to school and doing all of the things. Yeah. And look, while this part is happening, this physical piece is happening. Yeah. We're still concerned and working with neurology for this absent corpus callosum and what can this mean? And for anybody that's not familiar with that, essentially you have to be on alert. It can create anything from very mild or almost insignificant learning challenges to very significant. Sure. They don't know a ton about it. They haven't done a whole lot of studying with it because the only time they tend to recognize it is when there is a problem. Yeah. So you or I could be walking around without that. Yeah. And have no idea. Yeah. Yeah. And that was, one of the really fun things they said to us. But so now we're watching this like growth side of him from that standpoint. That was also this like, simultaneous challenge for us.
Sure. Yeah.
And
because you're like, how do you treat him in a way where he needs to be protected, but then how do you let him just be a kid, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, because they're twins, they're wrestling with each other.
Yeah.
My one is pulling his trach out from time to time. Like,
I mean, it's not funny,
but we're having are all self-imposed. The really positive part is they're being kids.
Yeah.
Right? And you want that.
Yeah, and like Owen wants to do that. It's not like he's like, I can't, or he has no fear, right? I mean, and he's just like, let's do this. I mean, I haven't interacted with him very often at all. But I mean, we just ran into each other at a playground, and like, if you didn't see, physically kind of like what he had going on near his neck, like you wouldn't know, which is awesome.
Yeah. Fortunately for us at that age, like kids are curious about it. And there were kids at that same playground that said to him, like, what is that thing on your neck? Like older kids. And he would just be like, this is my trach. This is what it's for. It helps me breathe at night. And at that point, he was, a lot of these trach kids, have trachs because of underdeveloped lungs and things along those lines. So, we also had all that medical equipment because of protocols for this. But, silver lining to everything, right? He had great lungs. So we didn't need a lot of this kind of stuff. And he was capped, what they call capped during the day. So essentially the trach, is an airway for him to breathe. But we would put a cap on it so he wasn't allowed to breathe during that space during the day. We would open it up at night. Attach him to humidification. So it was really, on a trach spectrum, it is like, man, the easiest. Any parents who have kids on a vent or anything along those lines, which we were on for a very brief period of time, really understand that this is a bear when you're at that level of it. When you get to this, I always tell everybody the most heartbreaking part of this is they can't speak, right? So once you trach a small baby, they can't speak. The trach essentially goes down near their vocal cords. So for the first few months, like when he would cry, you would see his face move, and you would see his heart rate go up and everything on his pulse ox. But you couldn't hear him. You couldn't hear him laugh. You couldn't hear him cry. You couldn't hear him make a sound. And that was, I think, for me, one of the toughest parts outside of accepting stuff was just like watching that every day. The occasional upside was my other one would be crying so much that I would say, like, at least there's a limit, right? Like, at least. It's terrible to say, but.
No, not at all. Because, I mean, listen, man, in all of this, there is like the challenges, but there is the kind of the fun little humor in it. Like, my son was nonverbal until almost 3. So like for me as a dad, same thing for you. It was like, all I wanted to hear was hear the kid say, hi, dad, or daddy, or mama, or whatever, and we got, obviously now we joke now. We're like, you remember when he didn't talk? Like I look at my wife when he's like motor mouth at 9:30 at night before bed when he's supposed to be trying to sleep. And he's telling me some crazy story about an Angry Birds game he played. And I'm like, Kyle, do you remember when he didn't talk?
Yeah.
And we just kind of laugh now because sometimes you're like, all right, time to be quiet, bud. And all you wanted for 3 years, at least out of me, and for you, it was probably a little bit longer, I'd assume.
No, it was less than that, fortunately.
Yeah, but that's all you wanted to hear. You wanted to hear, mama, dada, papa, whatever it was.
Yeah. Or just a little giggle, right?
Yeah.
Like a real giggle.
To hear their voice.
Yeah. It was awful. We were lucky enough early on. So once kids can pass enough air through their trach, they have this thing that's called a passing mirror valve, and it's essentially like a speaking valve. It lets them breathe out through the valve, but not in through the valve, or possibly the opposite way. It's been a long time. But it's this little purple valve, and I'll never forget it because we put it on, and everything moves so slowly there.
Yeah.
Because Chubb wants to make sure you are doing everything the right way. So they were like, okay, you can use this valve for 60 seconds today.
Yeah.
And then the next day it was 2 minutes, and then it was 5 minutes, and then it was 5 minutes twice a day.
Yeah.
And so in that time, you're like, all right, now I'm going to tickle him to death, and I'm going to do all these things to try to just get sound. And I remember seeing his face the first time he heard himself make a sound.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You don't even think of it from...
No. And that hadn't dawned on me at all, right? Like, he can't even hear himself make a sound. So the first time he heard himself make a sound, he kind of like jumped back.
Like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. And it was,
How old was he at this point? Ish.
Me
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably right around that time,
Yeah.
1.5. And from the passing mirror valve, you can actually graduate to capping. And when you're capped, all of your air is being forced by your vocal cords at that point. So the passing mirror valve does, it allows you to breathe in through that, but not out through that.
Okay.
So when you breathe out, normally it pushes all the air past your vocal cords. So that's where you get to hear that stuff. And by the way, as they get bigger, what we found out is he can speak over his trach regardless because it stayed small and you're stronger and you're bigger at that point.
Yeah.
But, you know, man, the first time you heard him giggle, like I just wanted belly laughs at because you could see them.
Yeah.
You could see the joy in his face. You could see him kind of shaking, like laughing.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
At his brother typically, because we would put them in the same crib a lot of the time at the hospital because you couldn't take them on the floor.
No.
You couldn't do anything with them.
Yeah.
When they're hooked up with the vent and everything else, it's so hard to move them. Yeah. And Chop's really great about getting you out and around the unit. But like, I remember the first time we took him outside wasn't until probably,
but it's just, it had to be that guarded.
Yeah.
Like in order for you to be where you're at now, you know, you had to go through all of those little steps and little milestones.
When we finally could, you know, it was still wintertime, right at the beginning of this whole thing.
Oh,
so we
yeah,
couldn't get him out, and then it was all weather dependent. And, you know, and it's a challenge. You're in a critical care unit. People don't have the time there's not enough bodies there to have the time to take a kid who's on the Willer side of things and do fun stuff with them because there's so many critical things kind of happening simultaneously around you.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as there's great care, which, I mean, we're heavily involved in the CHOP system too, because of just Bradley and his diagnosis. And that's where we're lucky. We live in a place where there is a world-class children's hospital right in our backyard. Like you can't even argue the fact that like your story is very different if you're somewhere in the middle of the country or somewhere that doesn't have.
I don't think we're here. Yeah. And I don't think we're here because I don't think anybody else would have caught the problem. And it was a scary problem. It was very rare. I remember the doctors telling us, like, this is very rare.
Yeah.
We've dealt with it quite a bit because anyone who gets this comes to us. But very rare, you know, and there's a lot of people over the course of this path that look at you and so go, you know, hey, you're so tough for dealing with what you've been dealing with. I don't know how you do it. For me, the answer was really easy. Like you do it because you love your kids and you just don't have a choice. Yeah. But more importantly than that, on your worst day at CHOP, you can look at the room next to you and realize somebody's having a worse day.
Yeah. That's the crazy part.
And man, does it put it in perspective.
It's the sobering part of it.
I was so upset that I couldn't hear my son laugh and it was breaking my heart. And then I would pop my head up and see what was going on with our roommate.
Yeah.
And realize like that was real selfish and to feel that way in that moment, you know?
Yeah.
Because we were so fortunate and we're still so fortunate to have this path that we do to getting him into a space where he can essentially have a very typical life. That feels like such a gift, especially when you see some of the other stuff there.
And the way that it started too, because, you know, a lot of the point of why I wanted to do this podcast was to kind of talk about, you know, the dad perspective of all of this, because I feel like it's kind of an underserved space and there is room for dads to like really just be very in tune and in touch and emotional about this type of stuff, you know, and you're kind of, you know, you're just like, you're a dad. You're supposed to be like, let's go, like, you know, play football and do this kind of stuff. And it's not like, you're not like crying in the corner of the room because, you know, you're watching your kid go through what you are seeing. And you're also like, you put to your point, you know, selfishly, you want to hear things, but in the end, it's really like the experience for your child is not what you want. And that's the emotionally heartbreaking part, is that you've brought them into this world. You can only love them.
Right.
You know? And if you're not emotionally connected and supportive to that child, like it doesn't help, you know? And that's where I wanted to get involved in a lot of this, is to give, you know, people like you a voice to just be like, hey, this is above what I want. And it's more important to be emotionally there for my kid and my family, because if I'm not, it's very detrimental to everybody's happiness.
The tough part as a dad, I think, you know, look, we get very step-by-step oriented, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and in our business too, dude, like my wife's looked at me and she's like, you're not in charge today.
Yeah.
Just stop.
It's tough. for us, and I don't know that this is true for everybody's journey, but it's tough to decide between getting on Google and getting into groups and talking to all these people about their experiences and everything else versus kind of allowing it to happen day by day.
Yeah.
And taking the challenges as they come to you. Sometimes knowing too much is in that world is.
It's exactly what I was going to say.
My fear was that it can be limiting, right? Because you talk to other people that have a similar diagnosis and you see what their limitations are 3 years ahead of you.
Yeah.
My fear for me was that I was going to allow that to kind of create a trajectory for us.
Yeah.
And what I wanted was a little of this optimism of, I don't want to know too much. I want to know exactly what I need to know to keep him safe today.
Yeah.
And I want all the resources that we can surround him with. And I think this was the one cool thing my wife and I both just leaned into hard at the beginning was let's lean 100% into this and surround ourselves with the best people that we can and PT and OT and speech and whomever else from a specialty standpoint we can get to put their hands on our kids. And silver lining of this, we had some really amazing nurses in our house who A, helped us be better parents, but B, helped us be really smart about what he was going through and kind of try to navigate that. But I was very careful of ever trying to learn too much about this because of how rare it was that I didn't want in my head for there to be any limitations anywhere. I wanted the limitation to be, we're going to support him as much as we can to get him as far as we can.
Yeah.
And I don't want to at any point think that we can't do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember getting Bradley's autism diagnosis, and that was the thing for me. It was, all right, here's the list of things that may never happen. And if you fall too far into that trap of the can't do's and the shouldn't do's and the won't do's, then you just kind of like you're saying, you close your mind off to all of the possibilities. So like, you don't want to limit your son and what he can do based on what you think he should and shouldn't be capable of doing.
It's the dangerous part. Once you make that assumption that, okay, my child may never be able to do this.
Yeah.
What's to push them to move past that event?
Or you're not going to push them.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, because you're just going to say, well, he shouldn't be doing this, so we're not going to go do this. Like,
and I say push, but I mean more like putting them in a position to be able to.
Yeah.
And I tease friends of ours, but like when it comes to eating with kids, right? Like if one time they say, I don't like mac and cheese. And then you go, oh yeah, my kid doesn't like mac and cheese. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at some point of like, I'm reinforcing this behavior that this child doesn't like mac and cheese. So now they don't like mac and cheese, right? Like, but I may have projected that on them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's the part that, I think is so scary. So one of the really cool parts for us from a neurological standpoint was that, A, we had an amazing neurologist who really understood this. B, she was very optimistic at the beginning. And what she'd said to us was the fact that he has a twin is like the best thing in the world for him because he's not going to see any limitations. He's not going to understand any of these limitations. He's just going to see what his brother is modeling and try to perform at that level. Yeah. Right. He's going to try to keep up with him every single day.
Yeah.
And so now for us, the challenge is, okay, we can't look at them as competition, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't measure one against the other. And as we're doing this, as far as like actually speaking words, Owen was first. Owen was first in a number of different things that, especially for not having a voice for so long and not being able to do these things for so long, you would go, there's just no way this is possible. He's always going to be this far behind. He walked, 2 weeks after, essentially.
Yeah.
And he was in the hospital for 6 months.
Yeah. Literally being forced to like lay down and not
in
do
a bed
anything.
all day. And, you could bring him down on a pad on the floor, right? Like a 4x8 pad on the floor was about the extent of the workout time he got on the floor. And the moment we got him home, he just exploded.
Yeah.
And the nurses all said this, and everyone who was trying to help us get home said this. But so the neurologist essentially said, like, he's not going to see any limitations, and you should encourage that, right? If he has difficulty with something, let's get him the support that he needs.
Yeah, sure. Like if it's fine motor or just gross motor or whatever, right. Let's get him the support.
And so we did, we had, part of this whole midline piece is he also has some visual stuff. So he can only see out of one eye. He has a morning glory optic disc. in his other eye. So he'll never really be able to see out of that eye much more than like shadows and things like that. We don't think.
Yeah.
Right. And so
But at this
far,
point, who knows, right?
I mean, we've been with enough eye doctors. He had a partially detached retina in that eye and all these other pieces to that. So we've been with 3 different eye doctors and surgeons, and we have a pretty good idea that he really can't see much out of that eye.
Yeah.
But he, with his brother, he follows him in everything. They challenge each other in everything. And our neurologist essentially added him to a paper about kids with absent corpus callosum and their development, the difference in their development when they have a twin.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a part of that paper, and just how he's kind of hit every mark almost on target, close to target, or on target from a typical kid.
Because he's got somebody there right next to him.
And
helping him along the way, or pushing
theory,
him, or
right?
challenging him, or
and so it's been so fun to watch. And every time we get through one of these milestones, there's this big sigh of relief of like, he's doing great.
Yeah.
But like you were talking about before, now he just never shuts up.
Yeah.
So last night before bed, I heard a 25-minute story.
Yeah.
As I was standing at the door going, okay, one more line.
One more. Yeah. All right. Go to bed. Yeah.
So, like, the beauty of it is, and I think people on the outside look at it and say like, oh man, this must be so tough. But there are so many typical kid moments, I think, just in all of them.
Yeah.
Right. Which you forget. You forget that there's anything different about them than any other kid in those moments. And I think that's the best part. Right? When you just get to be a dad for a few minutes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I mean, with my son, it's just like, Dad, the other day, my stomach wasn't feeling great. So he's being nice and very gentle. And then the first thing he said to me when we woke up the next day, he's like, does your stomach feel better so I can jump on you? It's like,
that's very thoughtful, right?
It is. But to your point, like, and to what we're kind of talking about, like, that's the type of stuff that, like, if you had let the opinion of what your kid should and shouldn't be doing, like, those are the moments that you might not have because you haven't been supportive and present, and like, there's nothing that breaks my heart more. And like, listen, I'm an older dad for a 6-year-old, and I know, but
got you beat.
But it's like, you kind of grow up and you get set in like what you think is what's supposed to be the way, and then you have these kids come into your life and it's like, holy shit, this is like something totally different. And I never pictured myself being this way. Like, I know that on top of just loving my son unconditionally and endlessly, like, I like who he's made me as well. I'm sure you feel the same way, but you wouldn't necessarily have experienced that either, maybe, if you had just had 2 twin boys that one of them didn't have a challenge. Like, you're different because of him, not despite of him.
Well, I think
in
because
a better
of
way.
My age too, right? Like, and I would imagine you feel the same way. I'm so grateful that I was older when I had them.
Me too.
Because I think I just had a better perspective and a better understanding and more patience, and certainly more resources because we were just, further down the path in our life.
Yeah.
To be able to do this stuff. And I think as if I was a younger dad in this situation, I would have been scared.
Oh yeah. If you're
I was scared as a full-grown adult, but
if you're 28, and you're having 2 boys, one with, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to get a house and, all the stuff along with, then what you learn. And back to your point too, with like, I mean, the patience and stuff, I think I wanted to interject. I was going to joke that like I had no more or less patience, I think, when he came along than I did in the very beginning, but I had a different outlook on life and I was able to understand that, like, okay, I can't do things the way that I do things now. I need to be infinitely more patient and more empathetic and more caring and more just like not judging on the basis of like how I think things should be. I have to judge and live my life now on how things need to be for somebody else.
Well, sure. And I don't know if this is in every parent thing, but I think it might be. Your behavior changes because you want to model the appropriate responses and things like that.
Yeah.
And very intentionally.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have had the maturity at 26 or 28 to be able to do this at the level that we are right now. It's made me a better person. They have made me a better person for sure, and a more thoughtful person. But yeah, I think that's, one of the most important things you can do, that we've talked to a couple of people since then who have had kids who have had trachs and were behind us and everything else. And anytime they ask for advice, I kind of give them the same speech, which is accept this all day for what it is. But don't accept the expected outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Let that book write itself.
Yeah.
Right. But accept the diagnosis and accept the fact that your child's going to need more support and more assistance, and lean into that as hard as you can and advocate for your child as hard as you possibly can. That's the big part. And make sure that they have every service and every opportunity, because you want to surround them with every tool they can possibly get to allow them to reach their maximum potential. And trying to navigate those things are a lot easier than saying it.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But,
yeah.
Man, is it, the moment you go, okay, this is a thing, this is what we have to work with, how do we make the best out of this?
Yeah.
Is where everything starts to change. Right. And that's where you start to see the right people come into their lives and start to make a positive impact. We had a vision person early on, which we didn't even think we needed. And he was explaining to us, as was our eye doctor, that kids, when they're born and they can really only see one out of one eye, that they'll learn to compensate for that. There's pitchers in Major League Baseball that can only see out of one eye, right? And can hit the ball. And so there's definitely a difference when you hear the diagnosis versus what you realize is the reality of it. Those two things don't need to be the same. And our vision coach essentially came in and said, no, this is going to be great. We're going to make this great. Yeah. And I'm going to give you tools to help. Right. So we throw balls a lot. We do a lot of stepping and a lot of looking and a lot of talking about where marks are on the floor and changes and things like that. And, here my son Emmett is running the grass and the second he got to a surface that was not flat, dead in his tracks, and he would just freeze and throw his arms up and be like, Dad, working through those things and more importantly, seeing him not quit and being supportive for him, that you don't want to push them, but you always want to get them to not give up. Yeah. Well,
because that's the difference is they got to go out of their comfort zone a little bit, but not to the point where it's detrimental and it scares them into wanting to not do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
And with some of these diagnoses, there's no comfort zone because they're never really comfortable.
No.
Right.
No. No. And I mean, that's the, we're talking the same language here as far as things go. Your son's kind of stems from physical and will probably, at some point move into developmental as he progresses through school, and my son is purely developmental, but we deal with that a lot where it's
how old was he when
almost 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you mind telling me what were the initial signs to you that forced you kind of down the path into looking for a diagnosis or looking to see?
We had, an SLP that worked with us that came to the house and she was working with him. And then my wife also wanted to take him to a different hospital. She took him to Nemours to kind of just get a different opinion, make sure his hearing was right, making sure that those things that he needs to develop speech are right, and just through talking about who he is and some of his traits, the woman that was at Nemours was like, well, you might want to get him tested for autism too, because he displayed a lot of the telltale physical, he'd walk backwards, he'd shake his head, he'd flap his hands. He was very kind of stimmy.
Got it.
As a kid. And we're new parents and we didn't have other kids and we weren't around a lot of other kids. So it's I've never watched a kid grow up because I've never had a kid of my own. So I just thought that walking backwards and shaking your head and walking on your tiptoes and flapping was something normal. And, you hear anecdotally throughout life that, oh, my kid didn't talk until he was 3, but then when he did start talking, he talked in full sentences. He sounded like he was, giving a speech in front of Harvard, for commencement. And that's what happened with my kid after he started talking. But then you look back on it and you're like, I wonder if their kid was autistic too and just not diagnosed, right?
Right.
So, but that's kind of where, that's how we ended up in that space with the autism diagnosis, was his lack of verbal communication. We were 90 signs in for sign language. We were all in already. We weren't parents that were just going to be like, oh, he's going to talk one day and he needs to talk.
Yeah.
Like, we had to communicate with him because, I mean, I'm sure, as you know, it's the harder part of life with a child is if you cannot communicate with them. And you touched on it when like Owen was in distress when he was a kid and you couldn't even hear him cry. So like there might be a moment where he's in his room for who knows how long crying and it's not verbalized because he couldn't do it.
To me, again, that's one of the things I look back on and say, how fortunate were we, right? That he was on a monitor.
Yeah.
And so his monitor would go off when his heart rate got too high. His monitor would go off because there were times that we'd be in the room talking to a doctor and not realize that he was crying.
Yeah.
Until you looked over or heard his monitor go off.
Yeah.
And So yes, for him to be alone at any greater level than that.
Yeah. But that was it. I mean, that was for us. So then we're all in on the sign language stuff. And then, like you said, our SLP was like, well, the worst thing that happens is actually he's not diagnosed. And then none of these therapies and none of these interventions become available to you. And she's like, frankly, if he is diagnosed, that's the best thing that can happen, because even if he's low support spectrum, he can get into all this stuff and then you can pull back on what he doesn't need after a certain amount of time instead of having to fight because he didn't get a diagnosis in school for an IEP or for just like because he's also ADHD. He's got, usually the two that go together in this world, the autism and the ADHD. I don't have to fight for him to be able to just kind of like take a Chewy to school or to be able to get up and wiggle around and do things to make him feel better because he has the IEP and he has the diagnosis.
That's the part that is so scary to me, that once you get that diagnosis, it really does open up a ton of doors for you. But like as a parent, it's really tough to come to terms with that. And it's, I think
it was hard for me.
I think that's just scary thing for any parent, right? Is to realize, all right, my child is not going to grow up the same way as every other child.
Yeah.
Right. This is not going to be a typical thing. But then making sure that you accept what's happening so that you can get them that support.
Yeah.
That's the part that I think is the biggest challenge for a parent. And because nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to share that information with their friends. Like most people do not go, oh, hey, I have this huge problem with my kid. Let me share this with everyone.
Yeah.
Let me tell everyone about it. I don't know why that is, but our nature is to kind of like minimize.
Yeah. And I keep going back to it a little bit, but like it's, it's inherent. Like my kid's got straight A's. He hit 2 home runs yesterday. He outran 4 kids scoring a touchdown on the football field. But like you don't talk about, we had a very kind of life-changing moment for our family where it was he I don't remember if he threw up in the pool or something at the public pool, but we had to get out and it was his fault. And he didn't understand that like he couldn't go back in the pool because they have to dump shock in and it's the end of the day. So the pool's closing anyway. So we're there as a family and he's crying and kicking and screaming and he's really upset that he can't get back in the pool. But then at the same time, people are like, well, that's the kid that caused the pool to be closed, and in normal, I think not normal life, but most people would just take that kid, shove him in the back of the car and get the hell out of there and not experience that. But like we wanted him to be there and we kind of stayed to show him that like those big emotions are okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel that way because you can't do something. And sometimes you're going to cause something that causes other people to not be able to have a good time anymore, even if they don't get it. But you need to be able to be openly emotional and tell people how you're really feeling.
Right.
And then back to your point with the diagnosis, like when I heard those words, it was just like, to me, I didn't know any better. So to me, it was devastating.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I didn't know, like I knew nothing about autism and all I thought was, how is this going to screw up my life, me as the dad? And how is this going to take things away from me that I want to experience with my kid? Because that's what you think in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I feel like if you're able to really realize that, like you've said, this isn't about you, this is about them.
Yeah.
And it's about making your kid's life as good as it can be. If you can't experience things that you want to experience with your kid, like that's not their problem. You need to be able to support them to do all the things that they can possibly do, whether it is in your agenda or not.
I mean, look, I think it's really tough not to have kind of that me first reaction to things.
And it's okay.
Because it's a massive impact on your life, right? How does this change my life? But I think that's all just the lead up to how does this change my life in a way that I could be the best support system for. I joked with my wife, we initially, when we talked about it, only wanted one kid. I'll never forget, I smoked for years, but I'd quit many years. And because it was COVID, at her first ultrasound, her 12-week, 10-week, 12-week, whatever it was, we were at Lankenau, and I wasn't allowed to go in because of COVID protocols. So the plan was for me to be on the car and FaceTime, except in the parking garage at Lankenau, which most people will never find out. FaceTime doesn't work, right?
Sure, middle of a giant concrete box.
So now I'm on speakerphone and, terrified, right? Because it's COVID, the world shut down. We don't have any income. It was scary, man. And all I can hear is the ultrasound text. She says, okay, so here's the baby. Here's the heartbeat. Here's the second one. Here's the heartbeat. And there's this pause. And she says, hey, Dad, we're going to let you go and finish up our exam. Mom will be out in a little bit. And that, you want to talk about me moments?
Yeah.
At that moment, I was like, oh, me. I have no money. I have no income.
Am I going to deal with this?
This is never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so we left there, and she got in the car an hour later. So I had an hour with my thoughts, right? And she looked at me. She said, are you okay? I said, no. And I didn't even ask her if she was in that moment. Like, that's how just a mess that I was. And we drove to Wawa, and I went inside and I bought a pack of cigarettes, and I stood outside the car with the windows rolled up so none of us came anywhere near her. And I smoked an entire cigarette, and I lit the second one, and I hadn't had a cigarette in years. Yeah. And I lit the second one, and I knocked on the window, and I said, I'll be ready to talk in a minute. Yeah. So to go through that and then to walk into the rest of this stuff, like, I think it's only natural that you respond that way.
Yeah.
Because you do think about that stuff. And I think as a parent, you also are so self-conscious of your kid and how other kids look at them and how other parents look at them.
Well, and it's so different now, man. Like, it's crazy,
Thank goodness, like, there's so much awareness and stuff like this now. Because
exactly.
And I feel like the world is a more curious place now than a more like, we can't look
blinders.
over that.
Yeah,
like,
blinders. Yeah.
And so one of the real shocking pieces to me is how many parents have been willing to walk up and ask. Right. And this is one thing I can say to non-parents or parents of typical kids. Like, I love when you ask. I love when you're curious about that stuff. I'm happy to share Owen's story. And here's the cool part. Owen's happy to share Owen's story.
Yeah. Which is even more important, right? Like,
he's got that confidence. He doesn't care when he walks into a room. And I think he doesn't care because he's a brother, and he also has a bunch of people around him that don't see it. We've had friends that say, like, after the first 10 minutes, you don't realize it's there anymore because of the way he acts. But I think the more time you spend with these kids, the more you start to see, like, who they really are. And you look past these things. And so now, 2 weeks ago, we finally get the strikeout.
Yeah.
And it's not the end of the road for us, but
no, but it's a massive milestone.
It is a massive milestone.
Like, you can go to the beach and do...
Can't do any of that stuff.
Not yet? All right. Okay, I got a little ahead of this. Sorry.
So what's happened, I'm going to fast forward you for a minute. What's happened really between the two kids is, this is the biggest challenge about having the two of them, is trying to treat them the same, even though they're not.
Yeah.
We want to allow them to do the same things and to be in the same place. So they're in the same sports and they do a lot of the same stuff. But Emmett wanted to swim, and I wanted him to learn how to swim. And we made an agreement really early on that we weren't going to limit the things that Emmett could do.
Yes.
Because we wanted him to wait for Owen to be able to get past this or do this or not do it because his brother couldn't. Like, that wasn't fair to him. And this was one of the other biggest challenges, right? Is like, how do you prioritize your typical kid and make him feel special and make him be a part of this whole thing in a real meaningful way, right? Yeah. And so swimming was like one of the first big things that we couldn't do. And so we said, we're gonna put Em in swim classes and we're just gonna keep Owen out.
Yeah.
And then Owen was curious about it and Emma was talking about it, so he wanted to go. And now almost every week he goes and watches him. And leading up to this decannulation, which is what they call it when they take the trach out, he'd said, I just want to go swimming with my brother. Right. And like, that was this moment that was both heartbreaking, but also like goal setting.
Yeah.
Like, it killed me, but bro, let's figure out a way to get you there.
Yeah.
and
so what are the steps? Like what are the prohibitors? Just out of curiosity now, because
so once they
I
take
kind
it
of
out,
want to watch him become Michael Phelps, because he's been watching his brother swim, right? So now he's like,
he
I'm going to
loves it.
get you. The second I get in that
He
water,
loves it.
I'm going to
And look,
get you.
we've the biggest scary things with the trach kit, right? Without a vent or without anything else, the scariest things are sand and water.
Okay.
So we have really done 0 beach trips.
Sure.
We have spent very little time around water because it's so dangerous, because sand or water gets right into the lungs. They can aspirate. This is as dangerous as it gets.
Sure.
And we did have friends of ours had a pool party, and we had him sitting on the side of the pool where the water was only about this deep and like the little walk-up end. And my wife and I were sitting with him, next to him. And he was so good about sitting there and like spraying the other kids with water, and understood that he couldn't get in, but kept saying like, hopefully next year I can do this. So the trach itself, just to give you the medical piece to it, it's essentially like an earring, right? Like the hole in your ear for an earring. There's nothing attached to the skin or anything else. It's a tube that goes in through a small hole in the neck, and then there's strings that go around your neck to hold it in place.
Yeah.
And so when they take it out, it's about that big. It's probably about that long.
Yeah.
And when it comes out, what they do is essentially put like almost like a Band-Aid on top of it.
Yeah.
And just like a hole in your ear, when you take your earrings out, the goal is for it to close up on its own. And they'll give you 3 to 6 months for that. If it doesn't, then they'll do a surgery to stitch it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Once that's fully healed, we're in the water.
There you go.
Like the moment that happens, we're in the water.
Literally like the biggest pool party you can probably throw.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have some risk moving forward, which is, this encephalocele starting to get larger as he gets larger. His airway can continue to get bigger. It doesn't mean this thing will stay the same size.
Sure.
It can get larger. It can get smaller. So we need to continue to monitor him, and we got some steps to go, and we still have nursing and things like that, keeping an eye on him. But the fact that there's real light at the end of the tunnel for this kid to be able to be in the water is best Christmas, birthday, life gift I could ever ask for.
It's going to be awesome.
I can't wait.
And I mean, and that's to kind of backtrack into like the whole thing, because I feel like that point is really what like I'm trying to get at, and I know that you're getting at with it, is that when all of this happens, there is that moment again of like, oh fuck, this is all the stuff that I'm going to have to really pay attention to, think about, that may or may not happen, that I have to hold him back from. And in the end, all it really boils down to is that you have one son that has watched his brother swim, and all he wants to do is swim with him. And that's all that you give a shit about after all of this time of dealing with all the hard stuff that you've gone through, and all the doctor visits and the room full of 20 people, all kind of back and forth about where they think he's going to go, because he's so unique and rare in what his case is, that all it boils down to is just wanting to be able to like throw him 9 feet in the air in the water and watch the joy on his face when that happens, right?
Yeah. And look, the milestones, the goals become different.
Yeah.
But they're still there, the same as a typical kid.
Yeah. Well, the milestones and the goals are different, but the emotional desire behind it is the same. It's to see the joy on their face.
That's it. Like we did Disney this year, right? A couple months ago. And I was not looking forward to this. My wife planned the entire thing. I had like nothing to do with this other than show up and have a great attitude for a couple of days and like carry them everywhere. Yeah. Watching their faces. Coolest dad thing I've ever done and been a part of. Like it trumped every single thing that I think I've seen. Yeah. I mean, they were just beside themselves every moment, the entire time. Yeah. Owen's he's got a Toy Story room, so he's got a big Buzz on his bed, and Buzz is his favorite. And man, when he got to meet Buzz, this kid was starstruck, like something I have never seen in my life. And I was worried that moment wouldn't live up to the hype, because we're so prepared for it. And it surpassed it on every level. Yeah. It was so fun and so cool for him. Yeah. But the moment is his. And that's the thing. Like you get into this again, like I said, and you're thinking about you. And then if you do things
in a great way. And you really understand that, like, once you have a kid, like, I can sit here and say that my field and my life has put me in a position where, like, a lot of what I think needs to happen is what kind of happens in
Yeah.
life, right? Because of just professionally what we do, what I do, you're a business owner. So a lot of it goes through you. But then, like, as you grow as a business owner, you realize that the people that you surround yourself with are the people that are really going to make you great,
Yeah.
right? And when then you become a parent, it's not you, or your wife anymore. It's that person, or in your case, the people that you've just surrounded yourself with.
Yeah.
And, like, all of those other, you know, ego ideology things that you have had in your head about yourself for so long just go away. And you hold this child and you're just like, none of that crap matters anymore. None of it. And it all is all about this little tiny human that I just brought into this
Yeah.
world. Right.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And it's awesome because you get to experience that, and not everybody gets a chance to do that. And you can choose, like I've said, the point of this is to be as emotionally supportive in there as you can, or you can choose not to. And I feel like choosing the side of making sure that you're really there for your kid is the side that's the right side.
Yeah. The healthiest decisions I made were guided by people around us, really.
Yeah.
We had such a great support team, and look, there's a lot of silver linings from this whole situation.
Mhm.
Being around all these nurses made us better parents and better equipped, right?
Yeah.
And realize that all of these scary things weren't unique to us.
Mhm.
And I think you need that sometimes, especially when you haven't slept and you know,
Yeah.
you're really in the thick
Yeah.
of it, man. Sometimes you just need somebody to grab you and be like, "It's okay.
Sure.
You are not the first person to ever go through
No.
this. You will not be the last, right? You're not special for this."
No. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kind of put it in perspective for you, but also just when you look around in a situation like this and people rally and you get so much support from your family, and like for us, our friend group, which is local and like so strong.
Yeah. But you find those, like,
We had people in tears, like, because he got his trach out, who have just been a part of this journey for forever,
Mhm.
and the fact that we have friends and family that care at that level, I think is what's put us in the position we're at today.
Yeah.
Um, as parents, I think us embracing it, and my wife and I kind of made a commitment early on, like, let's lean into this. Let's put him in the best possible position to be successful.
Mhm.
And I think that mentality put us in the best position to surround ourselves with great people,
Mhm.
um, and to really take advantage of every resource that was afforded to us,
Yeah.
because that's what it took to put him in the best possible position.
Yep. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
100%. Like,
Dude, you love your kid. And here's the thing that's universal, right?
yeah.
You just love your kid to death. Do everything you can to help them be successful. And that's it. And try to keep them safe at all costs, right? Like, that's being a parent in a nutshell.
My wife
It's
says it
what
to my
makes
son.
it-
She says it to him all the time. My number one job is to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Everything else is ancillary, through all of the actions, whether it's look both ways before you cross the street or give them the hug and the kiss in bed because it keeps them safe. That's really what it all boils down to.
cool part is, the doctors, everyone will tell you how resilient kids are.
Yeah.
And man, when you get to see that happen,
Yeah.
like, that's the stuff that,
Well, because they don't know something's different. They don't know something's wrong. They don't know that there aren't things that they can or can't do. Like,
Yep.
my son knows he's autistic, but he'll never know that there are theoretical limits that people have put in place as to what he can and can't do because of it. And I'm sure that, knowing you well enough, that your son will know that he has some physical disabilities, but he'll never be limited by them because
Right.
you're never going to make him, again, in a safe way,
right.
be limited by them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the great, I think that's every parent.
Cool. That's a good place to stop. It's a good way to round out the story. But I appreciate you coming on, and like, my desire for this and wanting to talk to you is just knowing who you are as a person and knowing what you've gone through with your children, and how far you've come with your experience with them. But like, again, it's just to like, just here's what being a parent and being a dad really means to people. And this is why it can be great, even if you do have challenges.
Selfishly, I was really excited for this to talk to you about it as
Yeah.
well, right? And I love the fact that you took the initiative to do this stuff, this is what makes the community stronger. This is what makes people stronger. And this is what makes like parenting easier is when you have outlets like this.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be somebody who listens to your podcast who you may never meet and who will never talk to you about it. But if you give them one or two little things that can help them on their journey, or one or two little pieces of confidence, or just one or two little tidbits to make them feel like they're part of a larger community, that impact is, you can't quantify that.
No, not at all.
And I think there have been people who inspired me and have no idea that they inspired me at this point. To keep going, or to do something, or to be open-minded to something. And that's both in work and in life, but specifically with Owen and everything that he's gone through. And it's little blurbs from a doctor, or little blurbs from a friend, or little blurbs from someone else at job. These things go such a long way. So I feel honored to be able to be a part of this thing with you. I can't tell you how much I commend you for doing it.
Thank you.
And I think that the more we continue to scream at the mountaintops how important this stuff is, the more we can help everybody else be more successful with walking through it.
Yeah. And it's, again, the reason is our children.
That's it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, man. Thanks a lot, Chris.